Hi, I'm Nicole. 3 hours before my brother's wedding ceremony was supposed to begin, I stood in the bridal suite holding a crumpled piece of paper that made my hands shake. It was a fake invoice with my business name on it, claiming I'd failed to deliver the wedding invitations and programs. Brandon had just announced to the entire wedding party that I was the reason half the guests didn't know the ceremony had been moved to an earlier time. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Some people just can't handle real responsibility, can they? What he didn't know was that I'd been handling something much bigger than he could imagine, and his little stunt was about to cost him everything he dreamed of for this day. The morning light filtered through the plantation shutters of my apartment in downtown Charleston, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. I'd been awake since 4:30, not because I wanted to be, but because my phone had been buzzing nonstop with text messages from family members asking about wedding details I supposedly hadn't communicated. Each message felt like a small paper cut, individually harmless but collectively exhausting. I padded to the kitchen in my silk pajamas, the ones I'd treated myself to after landing my biggest client last month. The coffee maker gurgled to life, filling the space with the rich aroma that usually helped me think clearly. But this morning, clarity felt elusive. Brandon's wedding was today, and somehow I'd become the family's scapegoat before the sun had even fully risen. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother, Patricia, her message short and sharp the way they'd become over the past few months. "Nicole, Mrs. Caldwell is asking about the programs again. Please tell me you actually ordered them." I stared at the message, confusion mixing with hurt. I delivered the programs to Riverside Gardens Event Center myself 3 days ago, along with the welcome bags, ceremony programs, and reception menus I'd designed pro bono as my wedding gift to Brandon and Vanessa. The programs had been perfect, elegant cream cardstock with navy blue lettering, featuring a custom monogram I'd spent hours perfecting. Vanessa had actually cried when she saw the mock-up, telling me it was exactly what she'd envisioned but couldn't afford from the high-end stationery company she'd originally wanted to use. I'd handled every detail, from the paperweight to the ribbon binding, treating it like any other client project despite the family discount of absolutely free. I set down my coffee mug harder than necessary, the ceramic clicking against the granite counter. Something wasn't adding. I'd built Harper Creative Studios from nothing into one of Charleston's most sought-after design firms by being obsessively organized and reliable. I didn't lose track of deliveries, especially not for something as important as my brother's wedding. My laptop sat open on the kitchen island, still displaying the client presentation I'd been working on late into the night. I minimized the slides and opened my project management system, scrolling to Brandon's wedding file. Every item was marked complete and delivered. Invitation sent 8 weeks ago, check. Programs delivered Thursday afternoon, check. Welcome bags assembled and delivered Friday morning, check. I even had delivery confirmation emails from David Russo, the venue manager, acknowledging receipt of everything. The buzzing started again, this time a phone call from my mother. I let it go to voicemail, not ready to defend myself against accusations I didn't understand. Instead, I pulled up David's contact information. We'd worked together on several events over the past 2 years, and he'd always been professional and thorough. If anyone would know where the programs were, it would be him. But first, I needed to get dressed and get to the venue. As maid of honor, I was expected at Riverside Gardens by 10 for photos, hair, and makeup. The ceremony was at 4, reception immediately following. I'd been looking forward to this day for months, excited to see Brandon happy and to show my family that despite our complicated history, I'd do anything for them. Growing up, Brandon had always been the golden child. 3 years older, naturally charismatic, the kind of person who could talk his way out of trouble and into opportunities with equal ease. I'd been the quiet one, the one who got good grades and stayed out of the way. While Brandon played football and dated homecoming queens, I spent my weekends learning Photoshop and building websites for local businesses. Our parents had always made it clear that Brandon was destined for great things, while I was expected to be grateful for whatever came my way. When I started my design business right out of college, working from a cramped studio apartment and surviving on ramen noodles, they'd asked when I was going to get a real job. When Brandon dropped out of his third college and moved back home, they'd called it finding his path. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now financially stable enough to gift my brother a wedding package worth over $8,000, while he'd had to ask our parents for help with the down payment on his house. But I'd never thrown that in his face. Family was family, and despite everything, I loved my brother. I chose a soft blue dress from my closet, something elegant but not attention-grabbing. The last thing I wanted was to upstage the bride or give my mother another reason to criticize my choice. As I applied my makeup, I thought about the conversation I'd had with Helen Rodriguez just last week. Helen had been my business mentor since I'd started Harper Creative, and she'd become something of a surrogate mother figure over the years. "Nicole," she'd said over lunch at our favorite cafe, "you have a gift for seeing people clearly. Trust your instincts, especially when it comes to family. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who feel most threatened by our success." I'd brushed off her concerns at the time, insisting that Brandon was genuinely happy for me. But as I drove through Charleston's historic district toward Riverside Gardens, Helen's words echoed in my mind. Maybe I'd been seeing what I wanted to see instead of what was actually there. Riverside Gardens Event Center sat on 15 acres of manicured grounds, overlooking the Ashley River. Spanish moss draped from centuries-old oak trees, creating a canopy of natural elegance that had made it one of the most coveted wedding venues in the Low Country. I'd always admired the property, but I'd also done my homework on the business side. The venue booked solid for 2 years in advance, with wedding packages starting at $35,000 for a Saturday evening in peak season. I pulled into the vendor parking area, grabbing my overnight bag and the emergency kit I always brought to events. Years of working weddings had taught me that something always went wrong, and being prepared was the difference between a minor hiccup and a complete disaster. My kit contained everything from safety pins and stain remover to backup USB drives and an emergency phone charger. The vendor entrance led through a service corridor into the main building. The space buzzed with activity as florists arranged centerpieces, caterers prepped the kitchen, and cleaning staff put finishing touches on already spotless surfaces. I'd been here dozens of times for various events, and the controlled chaos was familiar and comforting. "Nicole," David Russo's voice carried across the corridor as he approached with his usual warm smile and clipboard in hand. David was in his early 50s. With salt and pepper hair and the kind of calm confidence that came from managing hundreds of high-stress events. "Perfect time. I was just about to call you." My stomach dropped. "Is everything okay? Did something happen with the programs?" He looked confused. "The programs? No, they're beautiful as always. I was calling about something else entirely." He gestured toward his office. "Do you have a minute? There's something I think you should know." I followed him down the hallway, past framed photos of past weddings and elegant event spaces. His office was small but efficiently organized, with a wall of filing cabinets and a desk covered in vendor contracts and event timeline. He closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. "Nicole, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I pride myself on staying out of family drama. But what happened yesterday crossed a line, and I think you deserve to know about it." My pulse quickened. "What happened yesterday?" David sat behind his desk, his expression serious. "Your brother and his fiancée came by around noon with another woman, older, blonde hair. Said she was the mother of the bride. That would be Patricia Caldwell, Vanessa's mom. Right. Well, they had some concerns about the wedding stationery. Specifically, they wanted to know if there had been any problems with delivery or quality." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "Problems?" "David, you confirmed receipt of everything. The programs, menus, welcome bags, all of it." "Exactly. That's what I told them." I showed them the delivery confirmations, praised the quality of your work, mentioned how several other couples had asked for your contact information after seeing your designs at other events we've hosted. "Okay, so what's the problem?" David leaned forward, his voice lowering. "That's when things got strange. The older woman, Mrs. Caldwell, she seemed almost disappointed that everything was perfect. She started asking questions about whether vendors ever had last-minute emergencies, what the backup procedures were if someone failed to deliver as promised. A chill ran down my spine. What kind of questions? Hypothetical scenarios. What would happen if the programs never arrived? Could they be reprinted quickly? Would there be additional fees? She was very specific about the financial implications. I stared at him, trying to process what he was telling me. And Brandon, what was he saying during all this? That's the part that really bothered me. He didn't seem surprised by her questions. In fact, he was the one who brought up whether there might be quality issues with family members doing professional work. Said something about how personal relationships can complicate business arrangements. The room felt like it was tilted. "He said that? About my work? Nicole, I've worked with you on dozens of events. Your work is flawless, your professionalism is beyond reproach, and your attention to detail is better than vendors who charge 3 times what you do. For your own brother to suggest otherwise." David shook his head. It didn't sit right with me. I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. Did they ask for anything specific? Any changes or adjustments? That's where it gets interesting. Mrs. Caldwell asked about our policies for last-minute vendor substitution. Wanted to know if they could bring in an outside printing company, if there were any issues with the existing stationery. She had business cards for a company called Elite Events, said they specialized in emergency wedding services. Elite Event. The name wasn't familiar, which was unusual in Charleston's tight-knit wedding industry. I'd never heard of them either, so I looked them up after they left. The company was registered 3 weeks ago. No website, no reviews, no portfolio, just a phone number and a P.O. box address. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see. David, where are the programs now? Can you show them to me? Of course, they're in the bride's prep room, exactly where you left them. We walked through the venue's main hallway toward the bridal suite. The space was elegant and bright, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens and a sitting area perfect for getting ready photos. On a round table near the windows sat 3 neat stacks of wedding programs, each one exactly as I'd designed and delivered them. I picked up one of the programs, running my fingers over the smooth cardstock and examining the printing quality. Everything was perfect. The colors were crisp, the alignment was precise, and the ribbon binding was secure.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
These weren't programs that had any quality issues or delivery problems. These were programs that any professional stationer would be proud to claim. Nicole, David's voice was gentle. There's something else you should know. After your family left yesterday, I got a call from Elite Event. They wanted to know about our emergency printing capabilities and whether we'd be willing to accept a rush delivery this morning. This morning, but the programs are already here. Exactly. When I told them we already had programs delivered by the family's designer, they seemed surprised. Asked if I was sure they met the bride's specifications, whether there might be any last-minute changes needed. I set the program down carefully, my mind racing. What did you tell them? The truth, that everything was delivered on time, met all specifications, and looked beautiful. The caller seemed disappointed and said they'd be in touch if anything changed. A knock on the door interrupted our conversation. David opened it to reveal Melanie Brooks, the wedding planner I'd worked with on several previous events. She looked frazzled, which was unusual for someone known for her unflappable demeanor. David, thank goodness you're here. I just got off the phone with the mother of the groom, and there seems to be some confusion about the ceremony program. She's insisting they were never delivered and wants to know about emergency printing options. I stepped forward. Melanie, it's me, Nicole. I delivered the programs myself on Thursday. They're right here. I gestured to the table. Melanie's face showed relief and confusion in equal measure. Nicole, thank goodness, your mother called me at 7 this morning in a panic, saying there had been a vendor emergency and that you'd failed to deliver the stationery. She wanted me to arrange emergency printing and said the family would handle the additional costs. Additional costs for what? Everything is here and perfect. That's what I don't understand. She was very specific about the failure and seemed to have already researched backup options. Gave me the contact information for Elite Events and said they'd guaranteed same-day printing if we could get them the files by 9 this morning. David and I exchanged glances. The picture was becoming clearer and it wasn't pretty. Melanie, I said carefully, did my mother mention anything else? Any other concerns about the wedding preparations? Well, she did ask about vendor payment procedures. Wanted to know if there were any outstanding bills or if payments had been processed correctly. She seemed particularly concerned about whether you'd been compensated for your work. Compensated? This was my gift to Brandon and Vanessa. There was no payment involved. Melanie looked uncomfortable. That's not what she told me. She said there had been a significant payment made for professional services, and that the family was concerned about getting their money's worth. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. There had been no payment because I'd insisted on gifting my services. But if my mother was telling people otherwise, it meant she was setting up a narrative where I'd taken money and failed to deliver. A narrative that would justify bringing in Elite Events as an emergency replacement and presumably demanding a refund for services I'd never charged for in the first place. There's been a misunderstanding, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. I need to make some calls and get this sorted out before the family arrives for photos. David nodded. Use my office. Take all the time you need. As I walked back to David's office, my phone buzzed with another text message. This one was from Vanessa. Nicole, my mom is freaking out about the programs. She says there might be quality issues. Can you call me ASAP? I stared at the message, realizing that whatever was happening went beyond my mother's usual criticism. This was coordinated, deliberate, and designed to undermine me on one of the most important days of my brother's life. But what I couldn't understand was why. Sitting in David's office, I opened my laptop and began going through my files systematically. Every email, every delivery confirmation, every piece of documentation related to Brandon's wedding. If someone was trying to create a narrative about my professional failure, I needed to have my facts straight. What I found in my email history made my blood run cold. 3 weeks ago, the same day Elite Events had been registered according to David's research, I'd received an email from Brandon asking for copies of all the wedding files. He'd said Vanessa wanted to make some last-minute adjustments to the wording and needed the original design files to share with a friend who might help with additional printing. I'd sent the files without question, trusting my brother and wanting to be helpful. Now I realized those files had likely been used to create backup programs that could be produced by Elite Events, allowing them to swoop in as heroes when I was painted as the villain who'd failed to deliver. But there was something else in my email history that I'd almost forgot. 2 months ago, Helen Rodriguez had forwarded me an article about family businesses and the importance of protecting intellectual property. At the time I'd thought it was just general business advice. Now I wondered if Helen had seen something I'd missed. I pulled out my phone and called Helen. She answered on the second ring. "Nicole, how's the wedding preparation going?" "Helen, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. When you sent me that article about family businesses, was there something specific you were worried about?" There was a pause. "What's happened?" I explained the situation quickly, trying to keep emotion out of my voice and stick to facts. Helen listened without interrupting, asking only a few clarifying questions. When I finished, Helen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Nicole, I was hoping I was wrong, but I've been concerned about this for months. At the Chamber of Commerce mixer last spring, I overheard a conversation between your mother and Mrs. Caldwell. They were discussing your business and how successful it had become." "That doesn't sound concerning." It was the tone. "Nicole, your mother was saying that family members often don't appreciate help the way outsiders do, and that sometimes you have to teach people lessons about reliability and accountability." Mrs. Caldwell agreed and mentioned that her daughter had been overly generous with certain vendors who might not deliver professional quality work. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "They planned this. I think they saw your success as something that needed to be managed. Your mother has always struggled with the fact that you've built something impressive without her help or approval, and Mrs. Caldwell might have seen an opportunity to save money while also putting you in your place. But Helen, this could destroy my reputation if word gets out that I failed to deliver for my own brother's wedding, which is exactly why you need to document everything and be prepared to defend yourself. Nicole, you've built your business on integrity and quality. Don't let anyone take that away from you." After I hung up with Helen, I sat in David's office staring out the window at the wedding preparations taking place on the grounds. Vendors were setting up chairs in the garden ceremony space, and I could see the florists arranging the altar decorations I'd helped Vanessa select months ago. This was supposed to be a day of celebration, a day when I showed my family how much I loved them by giving my best work as a gift. Instead, it was becoming something else entirely. But as I watched the vendors working efficiently and professionally to create a perfect day, I realized something important. I wasn't the same person who used to sit quietly while others criticized or dismissed me. I'd built a successful business by being reliable, professional, and excellent at what I did. I had documentation, witnesses, and a reputation that spoke for itself. If someone wanted to play games with my livelihood and integrity, they'd picked the wrong target. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to Kevin Martinez, my business partner and best friend since college. Kevin handled the marketing and client relations side of Harper Creative while I focused on design and production. More importantly, Kevin had a background in crisis management and a talent for strategic thinking that complemented my creative skills perfectly. The email was brief. "Kevin, family emergency at Brandon's wedding. Someone's trying to sabotage my reputation. Need crisis management protocol activated ASAP. We'll call with details in 1 hour." Then I stood up, smoothed my dress, and walked back to the bridal suite where my work waited. Perfect and professional, exactly as I delivered it. Whatever was coming next, I was ready for it. The sound of car doors slamming in the parking lot told me the wedding party had arrived. Through David's office window, I watched my family emerge from a black SUV, their movements animated with what looked like urgent conversation. Brandon stepped out first, adjusting his tie with the kind of nervous energy that came from stress rather than wedding jitters. Behind him, my mother Patricia moved with purpose, her phone pressed to her ear and her free hand gesturing emphatically. Vanessa emerged from the passenger side, looking radiant in a flowing white sundress, her hair already styled in loose waves for the ceremony. But even from a distance I could see the tension in her shoulders as she listened to whatever crisis was being discussed around her. Miss Caldwell brought up the rear, carrying what appeared to be a large manila envelope and wearing an expression I'd seen before during family gatherings when she was about to make a point that brooked no argument. I gathered my things from David's desk, thanked him for his honesty, and made my way toward the bridal suite. Whatever confrontation was coming, I preferred to face it on my own terms rather than be ambushed. The hallway felt longer than usual as I walked past the elegant event photos and awards that lined the walls, each one a testament to the kind of professional excellence that had built Riverside Gardens' reputation. The bridal suite door was already open when I arrived, filled with the controlled chaos of wedding day preparations. Makeup artists were setting up their stations, the photographer was testing lighting, and someone had already opened champagne despite the early hour. The programs I delivered still sat in their neat stacks on the side table, undisturbed and perfect. "Nicole!" Vanessa's voice carried across the room as she spotted me. Her smile was genuine but strained, and she moved toward me with the kind of careful grace that suggested she was trying to avoid difficult conversations. "Thank goodness you're here. There's been some confusion about the stationery, and Mom thought maybe we should discuss it before everyone gets here." Before I could respond, Mrs. Caldwell appeared at Vanessa's elbow, the manila envelope clutched in her manicured hand. "Nicole, dear, we need to have a quick conversation about quality control and vendor responsibilities. Perhaps we could step into the hallway." The request was phrased politely, but the tone made it clear this wasn't optional. I followed them out of the bridal suite, noting that my mother and Brandon were conspicuously absent. The hallway was quieter, with only the distant sounds of setup activity echoing from other parts of the venue. Mrs. Caldwell opened the envelope and pulled out what appeared to be a formal document. "Nicole, I want you to know that this isn't personal. We all appreciate the effort you put into this wedding. However, we've discovered some discrepancies in the deliverables that need to be addressed." "What kind of discrepancies?" I kept my voice level, though my pulse was quickening. She produced a single wedding program from the envelope, but this one was different from the ones I'd delivered. The paper was slightly thinner, the printing was less sharp, and the ribbon binding was clearly inferior quality. More importantly, there were several typos in the text that definitely hadn't been in my original files. As you can see, there are obvious quality issues. Spelling errors, poor printing quality, cheap materials. "This isn't what we discussed when the family agreed to use your services." I took the program from her hands, examining it closely. The design was mine, clearly created from the files I'd sent to Brandon, but everything else about it was wrong. The typos were glaring, obviously inserted after the fact. The printing looked like it had been done on a home printer rather than the professional equipment I always use. Most telling of all, the paper stock was completely different from what I'd specified and paid for. "Mrs. Caldwell, this isn't my work. I'm sorry, this program wasn't created by me or my company. Someone took my design files and reproduced them with inferior materials and intentional error." Vanessa looked confused, glancing between her mother and me. "What do you mean, Mom? You said these were the programs Nicole delivered." Mrs. Caldwell's expression didn't change, but I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Annoyance, maybe, that I wasn't responding according to "Nicole, I understand you might be defensive, but we have witnesses who can verify that these were delivered by your company. Then let's go look at the programs I actually delivered. They're sitting in the bridal suite right now." "Oh, those." Mrs. Caldwell waved dismissive. "We had to remove the originals because of the quality issues. These replacement programs were printed this morning by a professional service to ensure the wedding could proceed without embarrassment." The audacity was breathtaking. She was holding a deliberately sabotaged version of my work, claiming it was what I'd delivered, while the real programs I'd created sat untouched in the next room. It was gaslighting on a level that would have been impressive if it weren't so personally devastating. "Miss Caldwell, I need you to understand something. I've been working with David Russo and this venue for over 2 years. He has documentation of everything I delivered, including photos taken for insurance purposes. If you're claiming these inferior programs are my work, you're essentially accusing me of fraud." Vanessa stepped between us, her voice rising slightly. "Wait, what's happening here? Mom, you told me there were quality issues with the programs Nicole made, but the ones in the bridal suite look beautiful." "Sweetheart, you're not familiar with professional printing standards. What looks acceptable to an untrained eye might not meet industry specifications." I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. "Miss Caldwell, would you mind if I took photos of this program you're showing me? For my records, you understand. If there are quality issues with my work, I need to document them for my insurance company." For the first time, she hesitated. I don't think that's necessary. Actually, I think it's very necessary, especially since you mentioned witnesses who can verify delivery. I'd like to speak with those witnesses and get their statements on record. The sound of footsteps interrupted our conversation. Brandon appeared at the end of the hallway, looking polished in his groomsman attire but wearing an expression I recognized from childhood. It was the look he got when he'd been caught in a lie but was still trying to figure out how to talk his way out of it. Hey, what's going on out here? People are starting to arrive for photos. Mrs. Caldwell turned toward him with obvious relief. Brandon, we were just discussing the stationery situation with Nicole. She seems reluctant to acknowledge the quality issues. Brandon's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Nicole, Mom explained the situation to me this morning. Look, I know you tried your best, but this is my wedding day. We can't have programs that make the family look unprofessional. Brandon, look at me. I stepped closer to my brother, studying his face the way I'd learned to read people during years of client negotiations. Look me in the eye, and tell me you believe I would deliver substandard work to your wedding. He met my gaze for exactly 3 seconds before looking away. It's not about what I believe, it's about what happened. What happened is that someone took my design files and created fake programs with intentional error. What happened is that Elite Events, a company that was registered 3 weeks ago, somehow knew to contact this venue about emergency printing services for problems that didn't exist. What happened is that you asked me for those design files, and now they're being used to sabotage my reputation. Vanessa gasped softly. Brandon, you didn't tell me you had Nicole's files. I needed them for the backup printing. Vanessa, you said you wanted to make some last-minute changes. I never said that. I loved everything exactly as Nicole designed. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Brandon's story was falling apart in real time, and everyone in the hallway knew it. But instead of backing down, Mrs. Caldwell doubled down on the attack. Regardless of how we got to this point, we need to focus on solutions. Elite Events has graciously agreed to provide emergency printing services at cost, and they're standing by to ensure the ceremony can proceed smoothly. At cost, I laughed, though there was no humor in it. Mrs. Caldwell, what exactly do you think my services cost? Because I donated everything as a wedding gift. There was no payment involved. Brandon's face went pale. What do you mean? I mean I didn't charge you a penny for any of this. The invitations, programs, menus, welcome bags, all of it was my gift to you and Vanessa. So when Miss Caldwell talks about getting professional services at cost, what she really means is that you'll be paying Elite Events for work I did for free. Mrs. Caldwell's composure cracked slightly. The family was under the impression that payment had been arranged. By whom? I never sent an invoice. I never requested payment. I never even discussed pricing because this was a gift. Vanessa turned to her mother, her voice sharp with confusion and growing anger. Mom, you told me Nicole was being paid. You said we needed to make sure we got our money's worth. I may have misunderstood the arrangement. No, I said firmly. You understood perfectly. You needed there to be payment involved to justify bringing in Elite Events when my work inevitably failed to meet standards. You needed a financial transaction to make this look like a vendor problem instead of a family betrayal. Brandon finally spoke up, his voice defensive. Nicole, you're being paranoid. Nobody's trying to betray you. Then explain Elite Events. Explain why a company that was registered 3 weeks ago knew to contact this venue about printing emergencies that didn't exist. Explain why you asked for my design files and didn't tell Vanessa about it. Explain why your future mother-in-law has fake programs with obvious errors and is trying to claim I created them. I don't have to explain anything to you. No, you don't, but you might have to explain it to David Russo, who has documentation of everything I deliver. You might have to explain it to Melanie Brooks, who received panicked calls about vendor failures this morning. You might have to explain it to the other vendors here today, who know my reputation and know this isn't how I work. Miss Caldwell stepped forward, her voice taking on a threatening tone. Nicole, I think you need to be very careful about making accusations you can't prove. Spreading rumors about vendor fraud could be very damaging to your business. Are you threatening me? I'm advising you to consider the consequences of your actions. The wedding industry in Charleston is smaller than you think, and reputation is everything. I felt something shift inside me, a clarity that came from finally understanding the full scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just about wedding programs or family dynamics. This was about power, control, and the assumption that I would quietly accept being scapegoated to serve someone else's agenda. Mrs. Caldwell, you're absolutely right that reputation is everything in this industry, which is why I'm going to make sure everyone understands exactly what happened here today. I pulled out my phone and dialed Kevin's number. He answered immediately. Nicole, I got your email. What's the situation? I need you to contact David Russo at Riverside Gardens and get copies of all delivery documentation for Brandon's wedding. Then I need you to research elite events, specifically their registration date and business connection. Finally, I need you to prepare a client communication explaining that Harper Creative Studios maintains the highest quality standards and that any claims to the contrary should be verified through official documentation. Consider it done. Anything else? Yeah, I need you to reach out to our attorney and ask about defamation protections for small businesses, specifically what recourse we have when someone deliberately creates inferior reproductions of our work and tries to claim we delivered them. Brandon stepped forward, alarm clear in his voice. Nicole, you're not seriously thinking about getting lawyers involved in my wedding. I'm thinking about protecting my business from false accusations and deliberate sabotage. If that affects your wedding, maybe you should have considered that before participating in this scheme. Mrs. Caldwell's mask finally slipped completely. Scheme? How dare you accuse us of some kind of conspiracy? We're trying to salvage a vendor failure, nothing more. Then you won't mind if I document everything for the record. I raised my phone and started recording. Mrs. Caldwell, for the record, are you claiming that this program with obvious typos and inferior printing quality was delivered by Harper Creative Studios? She took a step back. Stop recording. Are you claiming that I charged for services that were actually provided as a gift? I said stop recording. Are you claiming that Elite Events contacted this venue about emergency services before any problems were reported? Nicole, stop. Brandon's voice was sharp with panic. But I was done being quiet, done being accommodating, done letting people steamroll over me for the sake of family peace. Brandon, you have a choice to make right now. You can continue participating in this attempt to destroy my reputation, or you can tell the truth about what really happened. Vanessa had been growing quieter during the confrontation, but now she spoke up with a voice like steel. Brandon, I want to see the programs Nicole actually delivered. Right now. Vanessa, there's no need to. Right now, Brandon. We walked back to the bridal suite in tense silence. The room had filled with more wedding party members and vendors, all of whom looked up with interest as our obviously strained group entered. The programs still sat on the side table, untouched and perfect. Vanessa picked up one of the programs, examining it close. The difference between what I'd actually delivered and the fake version Mrs. Caldwell had shown us was immediately obvious. The real programs were flawless, printed on high-quality cardstock with crisp, professional lettering and elegant ribbon binding. These are beautiful, Vanessa said soft. Then, louder, these are exactly what I wanted. There are no typos, no quality issues, nothing wrong with them at all. She turned to face her mother and my brother, holding the real program in one hand and the fake one in the other. Someone want to explain to me why you tried to convince me that Nicole had failed when her work is sitting right here, perfect and professional. The room had gone quiet, with everyone pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. Miss Caldwell looked around nervously, clearly realizing that their private family drama had become a public spectacle. Vanessa, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No, Mom, I want to discuss it right here, right now. Because if I'm understanding this correctly, you and Brandon tried to sabotage Nicole's reputation on my wedding day, for reasons I can't even begin to understand. Brandon finally found his voice. Vanessa, it's complicated. There were concerns about reliability and I never had any concerns. Nicole's work has been perfect from day one. She's been nothing but generous and professional, and she did all of this as a gift because she loves you. The photographer, who had been quietly setting up equipment in the corner, cleared her throat. Excuse me, but I couldn't help overhearing. Nicole, I've shot 3 weddings where you provided the stationery, and your work is always flawless. If someone is claiming otherwise, they're lying. A murmur of agreement came from the makeup artist, who added, I've worked with most of the stationery vendors in Charleston, and Harper Creative is top tier. Anyone saying different doesn't know what they're talking about. Mrs. Caldwell's face was flushed with embarrassment and anger. This is hardly the time or place for what, Mom? For the truth. Vanessa's voice was rising, her composure finally cracking. For calling out people who tried to destroy someone's reputation for no reason. When exactly would be a better time? David Russo appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. Is everything all right in here? We're getting close to photo time. David, I called out, could you please confirm for everyone when I delivered the wedding stationery and what condition it was in? Sir, Nicole delivered everything on Thursday afternoon. Programs, menus, welcome bags, all of it. Everything was perfect, exactly to specifications. I took photos for our insurance records, as we do with all deliveries. He looked around the room, clearly sensing the tension. Is there some kind of problem? Mrs. Caldwell started to speak, but Vanessa cut her off. The problem is that my mother and my fiancé tried to convince me that Nicole had delivered substandard work, when the real programs have been sitting here perfectly fine the entire time. David's expression darkened. Someone claimed Nicole's work was substandard. That's impossible. I've worked with her on dozens of events, and her quality is consistently excellent. Not just claimed, I said, pulling out the fake program. Created fake versions with intentional errors and tried to pass them off as my work. David examined the fake program, his professional eye immediately spotting the differences. This isn't your work, Nicole. The paper stock is wrong, the printing quality is amateur, and these typos are obviously intentional. Someone made this specifically to make you look bad. The room was completely silent now, all pretense of privacy abandoned. Miss Caldwell looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor, while Brandon stared at his shoes with the expression of someone who'd just realized how badly he'd miscalculated. Vanessa set both programs on the table and turned to face Brandon directly. I want you to explain to me right now why you participated in trying to sabotage your own sister on our wedding day. Vanessa, I didn't mean for it to go this far. Your mom had concerns about mixing family and business, and we thought that it would be fun to create fake evidence of Nicole's failure, that it would be amusing to try and destroy her reputation. What exactly did you think, Brandon? He finally looked up, his face a mixture of shame and defiance. I thought maybe it was time Nicole learned that the world doesn't revolve around her success. Everyone's always talking about how amazing her business is, how professional she is, how much better she's doing than expected. Maybe I wanted her to know what it felt like to fail for once. The honesty was brutal and breathtaking. In a single sentence, Brandon had revealed years of resentment and jealousy that I'd never fully recognized. The golden child who'd always been handed everything had watched his little sister build something through hard work and talent, and instead of being proud, he'd become bitter. Vanessa stared at him like she was seeing him for the first time. You tried to destroy your sister's reputation because you're jealous of her success.
It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You're petty and cruel and apparently willing to sabotage someone you claim to love because their achievements make you feel bad about yourself. Mrs. Caldwell finally stepped forward, trying to regain control of the situation. Now let's all take a step back and know. Vanessa's voice cut through the air like a blade. Mom, you enabled this. You helped plan it. You brought fake programs and tried to gaslight me into believing Nicole had failed. You made me complicit in attacking someone who's done nothing but try to make my wedding day perfect. She turned to address the room at large, her voice shaking with emotion. Nicole, I am so sorry. I don't know how to begin to apologize for what they tried to do to you, but I want everyone here to know that your work is beautiful, your professionalism is beyond reproach, and you deserved better from your family. The photographer raised her hand tentatively. Should we postpone the photos until this gets sorted out? Vanessa looked at Brandon, then at her mother, then at the wedding programs sitting side by side on the table. The contrast between the real ones and the fake was stark, a perfect metaphor for the difference between truth and manipulation. No, she said finally. We're going to take the photos. But first I need to make something very clear to everyone in this room. Nicole Harper and Harper Creative Studios provided flawless service for this wedding. Anyone who says otherwise is lying, and I will personally make sure that anyone who spreads false information about her work is corrected immediately. She picked up one of my real programs and held it up. This is professional, beautiful work provided as a generous gift by someone who deserves better than what she got from this family today. Brandon stepped forward, his voice pleading. Vanessa, please. It's our wedding day, can we just move past this? Move past what, Brandon? Move past the fact that you tried to sabotage your sister. Move past the fact that you lied to me. Move past the fact that you're apparently the kind of person who destroys other people when you feel threatened. I made a mistake. You made a deliberate, calculated choice to hurt someone who loves you. That's not a mistake. That's a character flaw. Mrs. Caldwell tried one last time to regain control. Vanessa, perhaps we should discuss this privately, as a family. We're not family anymore, Mom. Family doesn't do what you just did. Family doesn't try to destroy each other for sport. The weight of those words hung in the air. I watched my brother's face as he realized that his jealousy and his future mother-in-law's manipulation had cost him something much more valuable than whatever satisfaction they'd expected to get from humiliating me. But as I stood there, surrounded by people who had witnessed the truth and were now defending my work and my character, I realized something important. I wasn't the same person who used to absorb family criticism silently. I wasn't the overlooked daughter who would sacrifice her dignity to keep the peace. I was Nicole Harper, owner of a successful business built on integrity and excellence. I was someone who had allies and advocates, someone whose work spoke for itself, someone who didn't need to tolerate disrespect from anyone, including family. And this was only the beginning of what I was prepared to do to protect what I'd built. The aftermath of the confrontation settled over the bridal suite like dust after an explosion. Mrs. Caldwell had retreated to a corner chair, clutching her purse and staring out the window with the expression of someone calculating damage control. Brandon stood frozen near the door, his face cycling through emotions as he processed what had just happened to his carefully planned day. The wedding vendors continued their preparations with professional discretion, but I could feel the undercurrent of whispered conversations and meaningful glances. Vanessa had transformed from radiant bride to fierce protector in the span of 10 minutes, and she wasn't finished. She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through her contacts with purposeful determination. "What are you doing?" Brandon asked, though his voice suggested he already knew he wouldn't like the answer. "I'm calling everyone who received those panic calls this morning about vendor failure. The florist, the caterer, the band, the photographer's assistant. Anyone who was told there were problems with Nicole's work is going to get a correction. Vanessa, please. People are going to start arriving soon. Can we just focus on the wedding?" She looked up from her phone, her expression sharp with disbelief. "Focus on the wedding? Brandon, you spent weeks planning to humiliate your sister on our wedding day. You made me an unwitting accomplice in trying to destroy her reputation. And you want me to just smile and pretend none of this happened?" I watched this exchange with a mixture of gratitude and growing concern. Vanessa's defense of me was fierce and uncompromising, but I could see the toll it was taking on her. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, and instead she was fighting battles that shouldn't have existed. "Vanessa," I said quietly, stepping closer to her, "I appreciate what you're doing more than I can express, but I don't want your wedding day to be about this conflict." She looked at me with eyes that were bright with unshed tears. "Nicole, they tried to destroy you, on my wedding day, using my wedding as the weapon. How am I supposed to celebrate knowing that?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a call from Kevin. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway to take it. "Nicole, I've got some interesting information about Elite Events." Kevin's voice was tight with controlled anger. "The company was registered by Patricia Caldwell 3 weeks ago. She's listed as the sole proprietor, with Brandon Harper as an authorized signatory." The confirmation hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd suspected as much. So this was premeditated from the beginning. It gets worse. I contacted their listed phone number, and guess who answered? Miss Caldwell herself. When I explained I was calling about wedding printing services, she immediately started asking about rush orders and emergency vendor replacements. She had pricing sheets ready and everything. "She's been planning this for weeks. Nicole, there's something else." I did some digging into Mrs. Caldwell's background, and she has a history of this kind of behavior. I found 3 online reviews from different vendors over the past 5 years, all with similar patterns. Unreasonable demands, disputes over quality, attempts to get services for free by claiming vendor failures. I leaned against the hallway wall, processing this information. She's done this before, multiple times, and here's the really interesting part. In each case, she had a backup vendor ready to swoop in and save the day. Always a company with minimal online presence, always offering services at suspiciously low rates. Let me guess, companies that she had connections to. Exactly. "Nicole, I think you stumbled into a much bigger pattern of fraud. Mrs. Caldwell has been manipulating vendors and clients for years, using fake crises to justify bringing in her own services or getting discounts from legitimate businesses." The hallway suddenly felt too small, the implications of what Kevin was telling me expanding beyond my personal situation. "Kevin, I need you to document everything you found. Screenshots, phone records, business registration information, all of it. Already done. I've also reached out to our attorney, and she wants to meet with you first thing Monday morning. Nicole, you have grounds for both defamation and fraud claims here. What about the immediate situation? I need to protect my reputation before this spreads any further. I'm already working on that. I've drafted an email to go out to all our current and past clients, explaining the situation and providing documentation of the attempted fraud. I'm also preparing a detailed response for social media, complete with photos of your actual work versus the fake programs. Kevin, wait. Before you send anything, let me think about this. I don't want to make things worse for Vanessa. Nicole, with all due respect, Vanessa isn't your responsibility here. Your business and your reputation are what matter. If you don't respond to this quickly and decisively, the damage could be permanent. He was right, and I knew. In the wedding industry, reputation was everything, and rumors could spread faster than corrections. If word got out that I'd failed to deliver quality work for my own brother's wedding, it could destroy years of careful reputation building. Send the client email, I decided, but hold off on the social media response until I can figure out how to handle the family situation. Nicole, promise me you won't let family loyalty override business sense here. You've worked too hard to let them destroy what you've built. After I hung up with Kevin, I stood in the hallway for a moment, collecting my thoughts. The venue was bustling with activity as the ceremony time approached, but I felt disconnected from it all, like I was watching someone else's life unfold from a distance. David Russo appeared at the end of the hallway, walking toward me with his usual calm confidence. Nicole, I wanted to check on you. That was quite a scene in there. I'm sorry about the disruption, David. This isn't how I wanted things to go. You have nothing to apologize for. I've been in this business long enough to recognize manipulation when I see it, and what happened in there was textbook fraud. Mrs. Caldwell tried to use my venue as a platform for destroying your reputation, and that's not something I take lightly. What do you... David pulled out his phone and showed me a series of text messages. After your family left yesterday, I started getting messages from other vendors asking about Harper Creative's reliability. Someone was spreading rumors about your work quality and delivery issues. I scrolled through the messages, my heart sinking with each one. Florists, caterers, photographers all expressing concern about working events where my company was involved. The campaign to destroy my reputation had been more extensive than I'd realized. David, who was sending these messages, that's what's interesting. They all came from numbers I didn't recognize, but when I called one back it went to Mrs. Caldwell's voicemail. She's been systematically contacting vendors in the Charleston wedding industry, trying to plant doubts about your professionalism. The scope of the attack was staggering. This wasn't just about embarrassing me at Brandon's wedding. Mrs. Caldwell had launched a coordinated campaign to damage my business relationships throughout the city. There's more, David continued. I reached out to some of my contacts at other venues, and 3 of them reported similar inquiries about your company. Someone has been working very hard to make sure you couldn't recover from whatever happened today. I felt a cold clarity settle over me, the kind of focus that came when the stakes became unmistakably clear. This wasn't about family drama or wedding day stress. This was about the deliberate destruction of my livelihood, planned and executed with calculated precision. David, I need to ask a favor. Would you be willing to provide a written statement about what happened here today? About the quality of my work and the attempts to discredit it? Absolutely. And Nicole, I want you to know that I'll be reaching out to every vendor who received those messages, setting the record straight about your work and professionalism. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. The wedding industry in Charleston depends on trust and integrity. When someone tries to destroy a vendor's reputation through lies and manipulation, it hurts all of us. This is about more than just your business now. I thanked David and walked back toward the bridal suite, my mind racing with plans and preparation. The family confrontation was just the beginning. If Mrs. Caldwell wanted to play games with my professional reputation, she was about to discover that I wasn't the naive target she'd assumed I was. The bridal suite had reached a state of tense normalcy when I returned. Vanessa was having her makeup touched up, though her jaw was still set with determination. The other bridesmaids were getting dressed with careful avoidance of the obvious tension. Mrs. Caldwell remained in her corner chair, now speaking in low, urgent tones on her phone. Brandon approached me as I gathered my things from the side table. Nicole, I need to talk to you. I'm listening. I know you're angry and you have every right to be. But please don't let this ruin Vanessa's wedding day. She doesn't deserve to be caught in the middle of family problems. I studied my brother's face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse or understanding of what he'd done. What I saw instead was the same self-centered concern that had driven him to participate in the scheme in the first place. He wasn't sorry for trying to destroy my reputation. He was sorry that it had backfired and was now affecting his special day. Brandon, Vanessa isn't caught in the middle. You put her there. You made her an unknowing accomplice in your attempt to sabotage me, and then you tried to manipulate her into believing your lie. The only person responsible for ruining her wedding day is you. I was trying to teach you a lesson. What lesson? That successful people should be torn down to make failures feel better. That family means you get to destroy each other without consequence. He shifted uncomfortably, glancing around to make sure we weren't being overheard. You've always acted like you were better than the rest of us. Building your business, making all this money, acting like you were so professional and successful. I never acted like I was better than anyone. I worked hard, built something I was proud of, and tried to share that success with my family. The fact that you interpreted my achievements as an attack on you says more about you than it does about me. Maybe, but you can't deny that you've changed. You're not the same person you used to be. You're right. I'm not the same person who used to sit quietly while family members criticized and dismissed me. I'm not the same person who would sacrifice my dignity to avoid conflict. I'm someone who worked hard to build something valuable, and I'm not going to let anyone destroy it, even family. Brandon's expression hardened. So what are you going to do? Sue your own brother? I'm going to protect my business and my reputation using every legal and professional resource available to me. If that makes things uncomfortable for you, maybe you should have considered that before you decided to betray me. Vanessa appeared beside us, having overheard the last part of our conversation. Brandon, stop. Just stop talking and start listening for once in your life. She turned to me, her voice gentle but firm. Nicole, I want you to do whatever you need to do to protect yourself and your business. Don't hold back because of me or because of this wedding. What happened here today was wrong, and there need to be consequences. Vanessa, I don't want to make your wedding day about legal battles and family drama. My wedding day is already about that, thanks to my fiancé and my mother. But maybe some good can come from it if it means you get justice and they learn that actions have consequences. Mrs. Caldwell ended her phone call and approached our group. Her expression set in the kind of determined pleasantness that indicated she'd decided on a new strategy. Nicole, dear, I've been thinking about our little misunderstanding earlier. Perhaps we all got a bit emotional and said things we didn't mean. Why don't we agree to put this behind us and focus on celebrating Brandon and Vanessa's special day? The audacity was breathtaking. After orchestrating a weeks-long campaign to destroy my reputation, she wanted to dismiss it as a little misunderstanding and move on without consequences. Mrs. Caldwell, this wasn't a misunderstanding, this was fraud. You created a fake business, produced inferior reproductions of my work, and attempted to convince people that I had failed to deliver professional services. You also contacted vendors throughout Charleston, trying to damage my business relationship. That's not an emotional misunderstanding, that's criminal behavior. Her mask of pleasantness slipped slightly. I think you're being rather dramatic, dear. No real harm was done. No real harm. You tried to destroy my reputation and my livelihood. You made your daughter complicit in attacking someone who was trying to help her. You turned what should have been a celebration into a battlefield. How exactly is that no real harm? Vanessa stepped forward, her voice cold with controlled fury. Mom, you need to understand something right now. What you did here today crossed every line I have. You manipulated me, you attacked someone I care about, and you turned my wedding into your personal vendetta. I'm done pretending this is acceptable behavior. Vanessa, honey, you're upset. Let's talk about this privately. No, Mom, we're going to talk about it right here, right now. I want everyone to hear this. You are no longer welcome at my wedding. The room went completely silent. Even the vendors stopped their preparations to stare at the unfolding drama. Brandon stepped forward, panic clear in his voice. Vanessa, you can't be serious. She's your mother. She's someone who tried to destroy an innocent person for her own twisted satisfaction. That's not a mother, that's a predator. Mrs. Caldwell's composure finally cracked completely. How dare you speak to me that way? After everything I've done for you, everything I've sacrificed, everything you've sacrificed. Mom, you literally created a fake business to try and destroy someone's reputation. You spent weeks planning to humiliate someone on my wedding day. What exactly have you sacrificed, besides your integrity and my respect? I was trying to protect you from making a mistake. Nicole Harper is not the kind of person you should be associating with. She's manipulative and ambitious, and she would have used your friendship to advance her own interests. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. Mrs. Caldwell, I provided thousands of dollars worth of services for free because I love your daughter and wanted her wedding to be perfect. How exactly was I using that friendship to advance my interests? You were positioning yourself as the perfect vendor, trying to get referrals and recommendations from our social circle. I specifically asked Vanessa not to recommend me to her friends because I wanted to keep our relationship personal rather than professional. I turned down 3 potential clients who contacted me after seeing my work at other events because I didn't want to mix business with friendship. Vanessa turned to stare at her mother with undisguised horror. You knew that? I told you Nicole had turned down referrals because she wanted to keep our friendship separate from business. You knew she wasn't trying to use me, and you attacked her anyway. I was protecting you from what? From having a friend who was generous and talented and cared about me? From associating with someone who worked hard and built a successful business.
What exactly were you protecting me from, Mom? Mrs. Caldwell's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. I was protecting you from people who think they're better than us. People who look down on our family and our values. Nicole has never looked down on anyone. She's been nothing but kind and respectful to our entire family, even when you were openly critical of her work and her business. The only person here who's been acting superior and looking down on others is you. The confrontation was spiraling beyond anything I'd anticipated, and I could see that it was taking a devastating toll on Vanessa. Her wedding day had become a battleground, and while I was grateful for her fierce defense of me, I couldn't let her sacrifice her relationship with her mother without trying to find some middle ground. Vanessa, I said gently, I don't want you to make permanent decisions about your family relationships because of what happened today. This is your wedding day, and it should be about you and Brandon, not about me or business conflicts. Nicole, don't you dare try to minimize what they did to you. This wasn't a business conflict. This was a deliberate attempt to destroy you, and it was planned for weeks. They used my wedding as a weapon against you, and that's unforgivable. I understand that, and I'm grateful for your support, but I also don't want you to have regrets later about decisions you made in anger. Mrs. Caldwell seized on this opening, stepping forward with renewed hope. Vanessa, Nicole is being very gracious. Perhaps we can all agree to move past this unfortunate incident and focus on your happiness. Move past it? Vanessa's voice rose with incredulous anger. Mom, you literally tried to commit fraud against someone I care about. You created fake evidence, spread lies to business contacts, and tried to destroy someone's livelihood for your own sick satisfaction. That's not something you move past. That's something you face consequences for. I pulled out my phone and showed Vanessa the messages Kevin had forwarded me about the client communications and legal consultations. Vanessa, I need you to understand that this situation is bigger than what happened here today. Your mother has been systematically trying to damage my business for weeks. I have to respond to protect myself and my company. She read through the messages, her expression growing darker with each revelation. She contacted other vendor. She's been spreading lies about you throughout the industry. According to my business partner, yes, this wasn't just about embarrassing me at your wedding. This was about destroying my reputation permanently. Vanessa handed the phone back to me and turned to face her mother with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, and absolutely final. Mom, you need to leave, right now. You're not welcome at my wedding. You're not welcome at the reception. And until you figure out how to make this right with Nicole, you're not welcome in my life. Vanessa, please. You're making a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life. The only mistake I've made is not seeing who you really are until today. Nicole, what do you need from me to help you fight this? I looked at this fierce, loyal woman who was willing to sacrifice her relationship with her mother to defend me, and I felt a surge of emotion that had nothing to do with business or reputation. Vanessa had shown me what real family looked like, what unconditional support and love actually meant. Vanessa, I need you to focus on your wedding day, and let me handle the legal and business aspects of this situation. But knowing that you believe in me and support me means more than I can express. I don't just believe in you, Nicole. I believe in justice, and I'm going to make sure you get it. As Mrs. Caldwell gathered her things and left the bridal suite in furious silence, I realized that the day had fundamentally changed all of us. Brandon had revealed the depth of his jealousy and insecurity. Mrs. Caldwell had exposed herself as someone capable of calculated cruelty. Vanessa had discovered strength and principles she might not have known she possessed, and I had learned that I was no longer willing to be anyone's victim, even if it meant facing uncomfortable truths about the people I'd thought I could trust. The real battle was just beginning. The silence that followed Mrs. Caldwell's departure felt different from the earlier tension. It was the quiet that comes after a storm has passed, leaving behind clarity and the need to assess damage. Vanessa stood by the window, her wedding dress flowing around her like spun silk, but her posture was that of a warrior who had just won a difficult battle. Brandon sat heavily in one of the chairs,
his head in his hand. The reality of what had just happened seemed to be settling over him like a weight. His future mother-in-law had been banned from his wedding, his bride was furious with him, and his sister was preparing to take legal action against his family. The golden boy who had always been able to charm his way out of consequences was finally facing a situation that couldn't be fixed with a smile and an excuse. I checked my phone and saw a message from Kevin. Legal meeting confirmed for Monday. Also, I've been monitoring social media and business review sites. No negative posts about Harper Creative yet, but I'm watching. How do you want to handle the immediate damage control? The immediate question was what to do about the wedding ceremony, which was supposed to begin in less than 2 hours. Guests would start arriving soon, expecting a celebration, not a family civil war. The vendors were still working with professional discretion, but I could see the uncertainty in their movements, as they wondered whether the event would proceed as planned. Vanessa turned from the window, her decision-making clarity cutting through the emotional fog. Nicole, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Is there any part of you that wants to see Brandon and me break up over this? Any part that would be satisfied if our marriage didn't survive what happened today? The question caught me off guard, both for its directness and for the way it forced me to examine my own motivations. I looked at Brandon slumped in his chair and tried to identify what I felt. Anger, certainly, disappointment, betrayal. But underneath it all, despite everything he'd done, I still saw my brother. Vanessa, I won't lie to you, I'm furious with Brandon, and I'm hurt in ways I'm not sure I know how to process yet. But I don't want your marriage to fail because of this. I want Brandon to understand what he's done and make it right. But I don't want you to suffer because of his poor choices. She nodded, studying my face as if looking for any trace of deception. Good, because I love him, even though he's shown me sides of himself today that I never knew existed, and I want to believe he can be better than what he's shown us. Brandon looked up, hope flickering in his expression. Vanessa, I can be better. I know I screwed up, but I can fix this. How? Her voice was gentle but implacable. How exactly do you plan to fix the fact that you participated in trying to destroy your sister's reputation? How do you fix the weeks of planning that went into humiliating someone who loves you? How do you fix the lies you told me, and the way you made me complicit in attacking an innocent person? I'll make it right with Nicole. I'll do whatever she needs me to do. I stepped forward, because this conversation needed to happen, but it needed to happen with complete honesty. Brandon, what I need from you isn't something you can just do and then move on from. What I need is for you to understand that your actions had consequences that go far beyond hurt feelings or family drama. I know that. I'm sorry. I don't think you do know that. Miss Caldwell has been contacting vendors throughout Charleston, spreading lies about my work quality and reliability. She's created fake programs with obvious errors and tried to convince people I delivered them. She's potentially damaged business relationships I've spent years building. This isn't something you can apologize for and make disappear. Brandon's face went pale as the full scope of the damage began to sink in. I didn't know she was doing all that. But you knew she was creating elite events. You knew she was planning to set me up to fail at your wedding. You knew she had fake programs made to discredit my work. You signed off on the business registration that gave her the authority to contact vendors in my name. I thought it was just about the wedding. I thought it would just be a lesson about not being so arrogant about your success. Vanessa turned to stare at him with an expression of pure disbelief. A lesson? Brandon, you thought it was appropriate to teach your sister a lesson by destroying her reputation. I thought maybe if she failed publicly, she'd understand what it felt like for the rest of us, always being compared to her success. The honesty was brutal, but it was also revealing. Brandon wasn't just jealous of my business success. He felt diminished by it, as if my achievements somehow made his struggles more visible. In his mind, tearing me down wasn't cruelty, it was leveling the playing field. Brandon, I said quietly, my success was never about you. I never compared myself to you or asked anyone else. I built my business because I loved the work and I wanted to be financially independent. The fact that you interpreted that as an attack on you says more about your own insecurities than it does about my intention. Maybe, but you can't deny that Mom and Dad are always talking about how well you're doing, how proud they are of your business. They're proud because I worked hard and built something. That doesn't diminish you unless you let it. But instead of working on your own goals or finding your own path to success, you decided to try and destroy mine. That's not sibling rivalry, Brandon. That's sabotage. Vanessa moved to stand beside me, her voice firm with resolve. Brandon, I need you to understand something. What you did to Nicole isn't just about your relationship with her, it's about the kind of person you are, the kind of partner you are, and the kind of father you might be someday. What do you mean? I mean that if you're willing to destroy someone you claim to love because their success makes you uncomfortable, what does that say about how you'll handle other challenges in our marriage? What happens if I get a promotion at work? What happens if I achieve something you haven't? Will you try to sabotage me too? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Brandon opened his mouth to protest, but Vanessa held up her hand to stop him. Don't answer right now. Think about it. Really think about what you've shown me today about how you handle other people's success, how you respond to feeling threatened, and how far you're willing to go to make yourself feel better at someone else's expense. My phone buzzed with another message from Kevin. Nicole, I need to update you on something urgent. Elite Events has been active on social media for the past hour, posting about emergency wedding services and using photos that look suspiciously like your work. They're essentially advertising their ability to save weddings from vendor failures. I showed the message to Vanessa, who read it with growing fury. They're using this whole situation as a marketing opportunity. It looks that way. Ms. Caldwell created Elite Events to discredit me, but now she's using the fake crisis she created to promote her own services. Brandon stood up abruptly, his face flushed with what looked like genuine anger for the first time that day. That's not what we agreed to. She said this was just about teaching you a lesson, not about starting a business. What exactly did you think Elite Events was for, Brandon? She said it was just to have backup printing services in case there were real problems with vendors. She never said anything about using it to compete with you or advertise emergency services. Vanessa pulled out her own phone and began searching for Elite Events on social media. What she found made her expression darken further. Nicole, they're not just using photos of your work. They're claiming they provided emergency services for a high-profile Charleston wedding, where the original vendor failed to deliver quality products. They're using our wedding as a testimonial, not just a testimonial. They're using it as a case study for their emergency services, complete with before and after photos, showing inferior programs being replaced with professional alternatives. I took Vanessa's phone and scrolled through the Elite Events social media posts. The marketing was sophisticated and convincing, using the fake programs as evidence of vendor failure and positioning Elite Events as the professional solution. Mrs. Caldwell had taken the scheme far beyond simple family sabotage. She had created a business model based on destroying other vendors' reputations and swooping in as the hero. Brandon, I said, my voice deadly calm, I need you to understand that your future mother-in-law has committed fraud on multiple levels. She's not just attacking me personally. She's created a criminal enterprise designed to steal business from legitimate vendors throughout Charleston. Criminal enterprise. Isn't that a little dramatic? She created fake evidence of vendor failure, spread false information to damage business relationships, and is now using those lies to promote her own competing services. In what universe is that not criminal? Vanessa handed her phone to Brandon, forcing him to look at the Elite Events post. Read these, Brandon. Really read them. Look at how they're using our wedding to advertise their services. As Brandon scrolled through the posts, his expression shifted from confusion to horror to something approaching genuine remorse. The posts were damning, not just because they were built on lies, but because they revealed the calculated nature of the entire scheme. I didn't know, he said finally. I swear to you, Nicole, I didn't know she was planning all this. But you knew something was wrong. You knew she was setting me up to fail. You knew the Elite Events registration was suspicious. You knew the fake programs were created to make me look bad. You may not have known the full scope, but you knew enough to stop it, and you chose not to. I thought it was just weddings, family drama. I didn't think it would go this far. Vanessa took her phone back and began typing rapidly. Well, it has gone this far and now we need to deal with it. Nicole, what do you need from us to fight this? I need documentation of everything that happened here today. Witness statements from the vendors, photos of the real programs versus the fake ones, copies of all communications related to Elite Events. And I need both of you to be prepared to testify about what you saw and heard if this goes to court. Consider it done, Vanessa said without hesitation. Brandon, he nodded slowly, the weight of real consequences finally settling over him. Yes, whatever you need. My phone rang and I saw David Russo's name on the screen. Nicole, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation developing. Ms. Caldwell is in the parking lot with a photographer and what appears to be a small film crew. She's conducting interviews about vendor reliability issues at weddings. The audacity was staggering. Not content with sabotaging my reputation privately, Miss Caldwell was now creating public content to support her narrative. David, can you legally ask her to leave the property? I can and I will, but I wanted to warn you that she's been approaching arriving wedding guests, telling them there have been vendor problems and delay. Vanessa grabbed her car keys from the dressing table. That's it. I'm going out there. Vanessa, no, I said quickly. Don't engage with her directly. You'll just be giving her more content for whatever story she's trying to create. Then what do you suggest? Because I'm not going to let her ambush my wedding guests with lies about you. Brandon stood up, and for the first time that day he looked like he was ready to take decisive action. I'll handle this. She's been using me and manipulating this situation from the beginning. It's time I took responsibility for my part in it. What are you going to do? I'm going to tell her the truth. That I know she created elite events. That I know she made fake programs. And that if she doesn't stop this campaign against you immediately, I'll provide testimony for whatever legal action you decide to take. I studied his face, looking for any sign that this was another manipulation or attempt to minimize the situation. What I saw instead was something I hadn't seen from Brandon in years. Genuine accountability. You understand that confronting her might mean there's no going back. That once you take a stand against her, she'll likely turn her attention to destroying you too. I understand. And maybe it's about time I stopped being afraid of people like her. Vanessa looked at Brandon with an expression I couldn't quite read. Pride, maybe, mixed with relief and cautious hope. Are you sure about this? Because if you're going to do it, you need to be prepared for her to fight back. I'm sure. Nicole, I can't undo what I've already done, but I can stop it from getting worse. And maybe that's where I start making this right. We walked to the window and looked down at the parking lot, where Mrs. Caldwell had indeed set up what appeared to be an impromptu media event. She was speaking animatedly to a small group of people, gesturing toward the venue building and holding up what I assumed were the fake programs. Several wedding guests had stopped to listen, their expressions ranging from confused to concerned. She's telling them there are vendor problems, Vanessa said, her voice tight with anger. She's making our guests think there's something wrong with the wedding. She's creating evidence, I corrected. If she can get guests to express concern about vendor reliability on camera, she can use that as testimonials for elite events emergency services. Brandon's jaw tightened as he watched his future mother-in-law manipulate people who had come to celebrate his wedding. How did I not see this before? How did I not realize what kind of person she really is? Because she's very good at manipulation, Vanessa said quietly. She's had years to perfect this kind of behavior, and she knew exactly how to appeal to your insecurities about Nicole's success. My phone buzzed with a text from Kevin. Nicole, urgent update. I've been monitoring elite events, social media, and they're live streaming from your wedding venue. They're positioning this as documentation of a real-time vendor crisis. You need to shut this down now. I showed the message to Brandon and Vanessa. The live stream was a new level of violation, turning their wedding into content for Mrs. Caldwell's fraudulent business venture. That's it, Brandon said, his voice hard with determination. I'm ending this right now. Before either Vanessa or I could stop him, he was out the door and heading for the stairs. We followed quickly, not wanting him to face Mrs. Caldwell alone, especially given his track record of poor decisions under pressure. The main floor of the venue was bustling with wedding preparation activity, but the energy felt different now. Vendors were working with the kind of tense efficiency that suggested they knew something was wrong but were too professional to let it affect their work. David Russo appeared at our side as we headed for the exit. I've already called security, he said. Mrs. Caldwell doesn't have permission to film on the property, and she certainly doesn't have permission to harass wedding guests. David, Brandon is about to confront her. Can you make sure this doesn't turn into a public spectacle? I'll do my best, but honestly, Nicole, the spectacle has already started. She's been out there for 20 minutes, and she's very good at making herself seem like the victim of vendor incompetence. We reached the main entrance just as Brandon pushed through the doors with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested he'd finally found his backbone. Caldwell was indeed holding court in the middle of the parking lot, surrounded by early arriving wedding guests, and speaking into what appeared to be a professional-grade camera setup. The problem with the wedding industry today, she was saying, is that vendors prioritize personal relationships over professional standards. When family members or friends provide services, there's often an assumption that quality control isn't necessary.
As you can see from these programs, that assumption can lead to embarrassing situations for the bride and groom. She held up one of the fake programs, pointing out the obvious typos and poor printing quality.
Several guests nodded sympathetically, clearly buying into her narrative of vendor failure and family disappointment. Brandon walked directly into the middle of the group, his voice carrying clearly across the parking lot. "Mrs. Caldwell, I need you to stop this right now." She looked up with surprise that seemed genuine, though I suspected it was performed for the camera. "Brandon, dear, I was just explaining to your guests about the vendor situation. I didn't want anyone to be caught off guard by the quality issues. There are no quality issues. Nicole's work is perfect, and you know it. Those programs you're showing people are fakes that you created specifically to make her look bad." A murmur went through the gathered guests, confusion replacing sympathy as they tried to process this new information. Mrs. Caldwell's expression shifted to wounded innocence, the kind of look that suggested Brandon was being unreasonable and hurtful. "Brandon, I think the stress of the wedding day is affecting your judgment. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No, we're going to discuss it right here, in front of everyone, because you've made this a public issue. You created Elite Events 3 weeks ago with the specific intention of sabotaging Nicole's reputation. You made fake programs with obvious errors and tried to convince people she delivered them. You've been contacting vendors throughout Charleston spreading lies about her work quality." The camera operator was still filming, capturing every word of Brandon's confrontation. Miss Caldwell glanced nervously at the camera, clearly realizing that her carefully constructed narrative was falling apart in real time. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said, trying to regain control of the situation. "The only misunderstanding is that I ever trusted you or went along with your scheme. Nicole provided thousands of dollars worth of professional services for free because she loves Vanessa and wanted our wedding to be perfect. And you repaid that generosity by trying to destroy her reputation for your own sick satisfaction." One of the wedding guests, an older gentleman I recognized as Vanessa's uncle, stepped forward. "Brandon, are you saying that Miss Caldwell created fake wedding programs to make your sister look bad?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. And I'm ashamed to admit that I knew about it and participated in it because I was jealous of Nicole's success and stupid enough to think that tearing her down would somehow make me feel better about myself." The honesty was brutal and public, but it was also exactly what the situation required. Brandon was taking responsibility for his actions and exposing Mrs. Caldwell's fraud in front of witnesses, including the camera that she had brought to document her supposed victory. Mrs. Caldwell looked around the circle of faces, reading the shift in sympathy from her to Nicole. The guests who had been nodding along with her story about vendor incompetence were now looking at her with suspicion and disgust. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice rising with desperation. "Brandon, you're destroying your own wedding over your sister's manipulation. Can't you see that she's turned you against your own family?" "Nicole didn't turn me against anyone. You did that all by yourself when you decided to commit fraud and drag me into it." Vanessa appeared beside Brandon, her wedding dress flowing dramatically as she joined the confrontation. "Mom, it's over. Everyone knows what you did, and everyone knows that Nicole's work is perfect. You need to leave. Vanessa, you can't possibly be taking their side over your own mother's. I'm taking the side of truth and decency. Two things you apparently abandoned weeks ago when you started planning this whole scheme." The security officers that David had called arrived at that moment, two professional-looking men who approached the situation with calm authority. Miss Caldwell saw them coming and made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. "This is harassment," she called out, addressing both the security officers and the camera. "I'm being attacked for trying to protect consumers from vendor fraud." Brandon stepped closer to her, his voice low but carrying clearly in the quiet parking lot. "Miss Caldwell, you have 10 seconds to pack up your camera equipment and leave this property voluntarily, or I'm going to start explaining to these security officers how you committed fraud, harassment, and possibly defamation against my sister. Your choice." For a moment, I thought she might continue fighting. Her face was flushed with anger and embarrassment, and she looked like someone who wasn't used to being cornered without an escape route. But the security officers were closing in, the wedding guests were staring at her with undisguised contempt, and her carefully constructed scheme was collapsing around her. "This isn't over," she said, gathering her purse and signaling to the camera operator to pack up. "You'll regret taking her side over family." "You're not family," Vanessa said quietly. "Family doesn't do what you did today." As Miss Caldwell and her camera crew retreated to their car, the wedding guests began to disperse, heading into the venue with the kind of excited chatter that suggested the drama had only made them more interested in the upcoming ceremony. Several of them stopped to speak with Brandon and Vanessa, offering support and expressing admiration for how they'd handled the situation. David Russo approached our group with obvious relief. Well, that was certainly eventful, but I have to say, Brandon, that took real courage. And Nicole, I want you to know that this entire incident has been documented by our security cameras. If you need evidence for legal proceedings, we have everything. Thank you, David, for everything you've done today. Just doing my job. And speaking of which, we have a wedding to finish preparing for. Are we proceeding as planned? Vanessa looked at Brandon, then at me, her expression serious but determined. Nicole, I have one more favor to ask you. Anything. I want you to walk me down the aisle. The request caught me completely off guard. Vanessa, that's traditionally something your father does. My father isn't here, and after what just happened with my mother, I don't want any part of this ceremony to be about the people who tried to hurt us. I want it to be about the people who stood up for what was right. Brandon nodded, his expression earnest. Nicole, I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything after what I've done, but it would mean everything to me if you'd stand up there with us as we get married. Not as my sister who I betrayed, but as family who I want to do better for. I looked at these two people who had just sacrificed relationships and comfort for the sake of truth and justice. They had chosen to fight for me when they could have taken the easier path of going along with the deception. They had turned what could have been my humiliation into their own stand for integrity. I would be honored, As we walked back into the venue to finish preparing for the ceremony, I realized that the day had transformed from a celebration into something much more significant. It had become a testament to the power of truth, the importance of standing up for what's right, and the difference between the family you're born into and the family you choose. The real victory wasn't that I had exposed Mrs. Caldwell's fraud or protected my reputation. The real victory was that I had discovered who my true allies were, and they had discovered something about themselves in the process. But the legal battle was just beginning, and I had no intention of letting Mrs. Caldwell escape the consequences of what she had done. Elite Events was going to disappear, her attempts to destroy other vendors were going to be exposed, and anyone else who thought they could manipulate and sabotage small business owners was going to learn that some people fight back. The wedding would go on, but the war was far from over. 3 months later, I stood in the sleek conference room of Sterling and Associates, watching Mrs. Caldwell's attorney shuffle through papers with the desperate energy of someone trying to find an escape route that didn't exist. Across the polished mahogany table, Patricia Caldwell sat rigidly upright, her usual mask of superiority replaced by the hollow-eyed expression of someone who had finally run out of lies. The settlement documents lay spread between us like a map of consequence. Elite Events would be permanently dissolved, its business registration revoked, and all social media accounts deleted. Mrs. Caldwell would pay $35,000 in damages to Harper Creative Studios, covering lost business opportunities, legal fees, and reputation repair costs. More importantly, she would provide written apologies to every vendor she had contacted with false information, along with formal statements retracting her claims about my work quality. My attorney Sarah Chen reviewed the final terms with the methodical precision that had made her one of Charleston's most respected business litigators. Ms. Caldwell will also be prohibited from registering any new business entities in South Carolina for a period of 5 years, and she'll be required to complete a course on business ethics and fraud prevention. Mrs. Caldwell's lawyer, a tired-looking man who had clearly taken this case reluctantly, nodded his acceptance. My client agrees to all terms as stated. Excellent. Nicole, do you have any final statements before we execute the agreement? I looked across the table at the woman who had tried to destroy my livelihood out of spite and jealousy. 3 months ago, she had seemed powerful and threatening, someone whose connections and manipulation could ruin everything I'd worked to build. Now she looked small and defeated, the consequences of her actions finally catching up with her. Mrs. Caldwell, I want you to understand something. This isn't about revenge or getting even. This is about making sure that what you did to me doesn't happen to anyone else. Small business owners work incredibly hard to build their reputations, and people like you who try to tear them down for personal gain need to face real consequences. She didn't respond, but I could see in her eyes that she understood. The settlement wasn't just about money. It was about establishing a precedent that fraud and manipulation wouldn't be tolerated, even when it came wrapped in family drama and wedding day stress. As we signed the final documents, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The wedding itself had been beautiful, despite everything that had happened beforehand. Walking Vanessa down the aisle had been one of the most emotional experiences of my life, a symbol of how crisis had transformed into chosen family. Brandon had delivered vows that spoke not just to his love for Vanessa, but to his commitment to becoming a better person, someone worthy of the loyalty she had shown him. The reception had been magical in ways that expensive decorations and perfect planning couldn't achieve. It had been a celebration of authenticity over appearance, of courage over convenience. When David Russo gave a toast about the importance of integrity in both business and relationships, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. But the real victory had come in the weeks that followed, as word spread throughout Charleston's wedding industry about what had really happened at the Harper Caldwell wedding. Instead of damaging my reputation, Mrs. Caldwell's scheme had actually enhanced it. Vendors began referring clients to me specifically, because they knew I was someone who would stand up against fraud and manipulation. Brides started choosing Harper Creative Studios because they wanted to work with someone who valued truth over profit. Kevin had documented everything meticulously, creating a case study that our attorney had used as a template for other small business owners facing similar attacks. The story had even caught the attention of the Better Business Bureau, which had launched an investigation into fraudulent vendor replacement schemes throughout the Southeast. After the settlement meeting concluded and Miss Caldwell slunk away with her attorney, Sarah and I walked out into the bright Charleston afternoon. The historic district buzzed with its usual energy, tourists and locals mixing on sidewalks lined with centuries-old architecture and modern businesses. Nicole, I have to tell you, in 20 years of practicing law, I've rarely seen a case where the victim turned the tables so completely. You didn't just defend yourself, you dismantled an entire fraud operation, and probably prevented dozens of other small businesses from being targeted. I had help. A lot of help from people who believed in doing the right thing. You had allies because you earned them through years of excellent work and professional integrity. That's not luck, that's the result of character. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Settlement meeting today, right? Brandon and I are at Riverside Gardens looking at our wedding photos. Want to meet us for dinner to celebrate? The invitation made me smile. Brandon and Vanessa's marriage had not only survived the chaos of their wedding day, it had been strengthened by it. They had learned things about each other during that crisis that might have taken years to discover otherwise. Brandon had confronted his own insecurities and jealousy, entering therapy to address the patterns of thinking that had made him vulnerable to Mrs. Caldwell's manipulation. Vanessa had discovered reserves of strength and principle that had impressed everyone who knew her. Their relationship with Mrs. Caldwell remained severed, a consequence she would have to live with for the rest of her life. But they had both expressed gratitude that the truth had come out before they started a family, before they had children who might have been influenced by her toxic patterns of behavior. I texted back, settlement complete. Mrs. Caldwell is out of business permanently. Dinner sounds perfect. As I walked back to my car, I passed the storefront that had become the new location for Harper Creative Studios. The original space had grown too small as business expanded, driven partly by the reputation boost from the wedding incident and partly by the quality referrals from satisfied clients. The new studio was bright and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows that let in natural light, and a conference room where I could meet with couples to plan the most important days of their lives. The business had grown beyond my wildest expectations, but more importantly, it had become something I was genuinely proud of. We now employed 3 full-time designers and had partnered with a network of trusted vendors throughout the region. Every project was approached with the same attention to detail and commitment to excellence that had characterized my work from the beginning. I unlocked my car and sat for a moment, processing the finality of what had just happened in that conference room. Mrs. Caldwell's attempt to destroy me had backfired spectacularly, but I took no pleasure in her downfall. What satisfied me was the knowledge that her scheme had been exposed and stopped before it could harm other innocent business owners. My phone rang as I started the engine. It was Helen Rodriguez, my longtime mentor and friend. Nicole, Kevin told me about the settlement. How are you feeling? Relieved mostly, and grateful that it's finally over. I'm proud of you, you know. 3 months ago, you could have chosen to quietly absorb the attack and try to rebuild your reputation privately. Instead, you fought back and turned your defense into protection for other people. That takes real character. I learned from the best, I said, thinking about all the guidance Helen had provided over the years. You always told me that success isn't just about building something for yourself, it's about making things better for the people who come after you. And you've done exactly that. The precedent you've set with this case is going to protect small business owners for years to come. After I hung up with Helen, I drove through Charleston's familiar streets toward Riverside Gardens, thinking about how much had changed since that chaotic wedding day. The crisis had revealed things about my family, my relationships and myself that might have remained hidden for years under normal circumstances. Brandon had kept his promise to become a better person. He had not only entered therapy but had also enrolled in business classes, working toward opening his own real estate development company with a focus on affordable housing. His apology to me had been followed by concrete actions that demonstrated genuine change, not just words meant to smooth over conflict. Our relationship would never be the same as it had been before his betrayal, but it had evolved into something more honest and mature. We now talked openly about his jealousy and insecurity, about my success and his struggles, about the family dynamics that had contributed to the crisis. It wasn't always comfortable, but it was real in a way our previous relationship had never been. Vanessa had become one of my closest friends, someone whose loyalty during the crisis had created a bond that felt more like sisterhood than in-law relationship. She had also become one of my most effective advocates, recommending Harper Creative Studios to friends and colleagues with the kind of enthusiastic endorsement that money couldn't buy. When I arrived at Riverside Gardens, I found Brandon and Vanessa in the main reception hall, surrounded by photo albums and laughing at candid shots from their wedding day. Despite everything that had happened, their wedding photos were stunning, capturing not just the beauty of the day but the genuine emotion and triumph of people who had chosen truth over convenience. Nicole, Vanessa jumped up to hug me as I entered. How did it go? Tell us everything. It went exactly as we hoped. Elite Events is permanently shut down. Mrs. Caldwell has agreed to retract all false statements about my work, and she's paying damages that will more than cover the cost of fighting her. Brandon stood and extended his hand, then pulled me into a hug and I'm sorry it took 3 months of legal battles to clean up the mess I helped create. The important thing is that it's cleaned up, and hopefully the precedent will prevent other people from going through what we went through. David Russo appeared from his office, drawn by the sound of celebration. Nicole, congratulations on the settlement. I heard it was a complete victory, thanks to your documentation and testimony day. The security footage and witness statements from venue staff were crucial to building our case. Just doing my job, but I have to say, watching you turn that attack into a platform for protecting other small businesses has been inspiring. You've become something of a legend in the Charleston wedding industry. As we talked, I reflected on how the crisis had transformed not just my business but my entire approach to life. I was no longer the quiet person who absorbed criticism and conflict in the name of keeping peace. I had learned to stand up for myself, to demand respect, and to fight back against people who tried to exploit what they perceived as weakness. But I had also learned the value of having real allies, people who would stand with you when the stakes were high and the outcome uncertain. Kevin, Helen, David, Vanessa and even Brandon in his imperfect way had all demonstrated that loyalty and integrity weren't just ideals but practical forces that could overcome manipulation and we left Riverside Gardens and drove to a small restaurant in the historic district, a place known for its excellent food and intimate atmosphere. Over dinner we talked about the future, about Brandon and Vanessa's plans to start a family, about the continued growth of Harper Creative Studios, about the lessons we had all learned from the experience. You know what's funny? Vanessa said as we shared dessert. My mother's scheme to destroy Nicole's reputation actually made it stronger. The wedding industry in Charleston knows Nicole as someone who maintains the highest standards and won't tolerate fraud or manipulation. That's exactly the kind of person brides want to work with. It's ironic, Brandon agreed. She was so focused on tearing Nicole down that she didn't consider that her lies might be exposed and her reputation might be the one that got destroyed. The truth has a way of coming out, especially when people are as bad at covering their tracks as Mrs. Caldwell was. Creating elite events, leaving paper trails, live streaming her fraud, she made it easy to build a case against her. As the evening wound down, I thought about the question Vanessa had asked me months ago in the bridal suite, whether I was satisfied with how everything had turned out. The answer was complicated. I wasn't happy that the crisis had happened, wasn't glad that family relationships had been damaged, wasn't pleased that Vanessa had lost her mother over the incident, but I was satisfied that truth had prevailed over manipulation, that consequences had followed actions, and that the experience had revealed the character of everyone involved. I was proud that I had found the courage to fight back instead of absorbing the attack quietly. I was grateful for the allies who had stood with me and the business growth that had resulted from maintaining my principles. Most importantly, I was confident that I would never again be the kind of person who could be easily victimized by schemes like Mrs. Caldwell's. I had learned to recognize manipulation early, to document everything, to seek help when needed, and to respond decisively when attacked. As we said goodbye in the restaurant parking lot, Brandon pulled me aside for a private conversation. Nicole, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry for what I did, and I'm grateful that you didn't let it destroy our relationship permanently. Brandon, we're family, complicated, flawed, sometimes difficult family, but family nonetheless. What matters is that you learned from the experience and became a better person because of it. I did learn. I learned that tearing other people down never makes you feel better about yourself. I learned that jealousy is destructive and stupid. And I learned that having a sister who's successful and principled is something to be proud of, not threatened by. And I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was, and that standing up for yourself doesn't mean you stop caring about other people. 3 months later, I received an invitation that made me smile. Brandon and Vanessa were hosting a first anniversary party, and they wanted Harper Creative Studios to handle all the stationery and decoration. The invitation itself was elegant and playful, featuring a timeline of their relationship that included a section labeled "The Day We Learned What Really Mattered." The party was everything their wedding had been, and more, a celebration of love, growth, and the kind of hard-won happiness that comes from choosing truth over comfort. Brandon gave a speech about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who challenge you to be better, and Vanessa talked about the value of finding your voice and using it to protect the people you care about. But the moment that meant the most to me came near the end of the evening, when a young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "Miss Harper, I'm sorry to bother you, but I had to thank you. I'm a wedding photographer, and last month a client tried to pull the same kind of scheme on me that Miss Caldwell tried on you, but I knew your story, and I knew what to look for. I documented everything, got witnesses, and exposed the fraud before it could damage my reputation. Your case gave me the roadmap for protecting myself." Standing there, listening to this young entrepreneur tell me how my experience had helped her avoid the same trap, I realized that the real victory hadn't been the settlement or the business growth or even the family reconciliation. The real victory was knowing that something good had come from something painful, that my willingness to fight back had made things easier for someone else facing the same challenge. Later that night, I sat in my new studio, working on designs for upcoming weddings, and thinking about the journey that had brought me to this point. The quiet girl who used to absorb criticism and avoid conflict had become someone who stood up for herself and others, someone who turned attacks into opportunities and setbacks into comebacks. Miss Caldwell had tried to teach me a lesson about staying in my place, about not getting too successful or too confident. Instead, she had taught me about my own strength, about the power of integrity, and about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who value truth over convenience. The wedding industry in Charleston was better because Mrs. Caldwell's fraud had been exposed and stopped. Other small business owners were safer because the precedent had been set that such attacks would face serious consequences. And I was stronger, more confident, and more successful than I had ever imagined possible. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is to have someone try to destroy you and fail, because in the process of defending yourself, you discover who you really are and what you're truly capable of achieving. The fake programs that Miss Caldwell had created to destroy my reputation now sat in a frame on my office wall, not as a reminder of the attack, but as a symbol of what happens when truth confronts lies, when preparation meets opportunity, and when quiet strength finally finds its voice. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.